Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason.
Happy Tuesday, or as producer Trevor would like to say, Happy Tuesday. Stuart Holden on the show today. I'm excited. I'm sorry. The first thing I have to say, Stuart Holden is going to come on the show and do the last half hour of the program with me, sitting in as a co-host. We'll certainly talk to Stu about everything that's happening with him and his life, the good and the bad. But he's going to sit in as a I'm excited. I'm buzzing. Our little social media campaign worked out. Thank you to everybody who helped with that. But before we get to Stu, we've got plenty to do in the first hour of the program. Our friend Musa Okwonga, Manchester United blogger for ESPNFC and all-around great guy, will join us to talk about the situation at Manchester United. It's a crisis. I'm loath to use that word unless it is absolutely necessary. And it has lost all meaning. It's one of those words that has been used to death that has lost all meaning. The word crisis. A real crisis has nothing to do with football, has nothing to do with a manager who can't get his team together or has lost control of the locker room. What? That's not a crisis. A crisis is something that involves people's lives. That's a crisis. But in the football context, Manchester United is in crisis, as the English media likes to say. So we will talk to Musa and go through everything that is happening there at Manchester United, because they have a crucial Champions League match tomorrow. Is that game tomorrow against against Olympiacos? They are down 2 goals in that tie. They've got to overcome that deficit. That may be David Moyes' job hanging on the line. And I'm going to ask Musa flat out, should David Moyes be in the job right now? Should he have already been fired? Because it's not going well. And what we've established is you can't go from stability to stability and just hope and pray that it works out the way it did the last time with Alex Ferguson. Now, look, different circumstances from when Alex Ferguson took over way back when and when David Moyes took over. The bar is higher now. Moyes has less, despite the fact that Ferguson's experience was in Scottish football, Moyes has less of a winning resume than Alex Ferguson had. Alex Ferguson had done some pretty big things in Scottish football, if you're not aware, if you somehow missed that. David Moyes, while he did a fine job at Everton, never really took them to the heights that would prepare him to be under the scrutiny he is at Old Trafford. And that's the issue there for David Moyes. We'll talk to Musa about that. And then one of my favorite guests, Christopher Gaffney, from down in Brazil, who's a visiting professor in the Graduate School of Architecture and Urbanism at a university in Brazil. We've had him before to talk through some of the social issues, some of the white elephant issues happening in Brazil. Clearly, we're excited for the World Cup. It's 86 days is the countdown until the World Cup begins in Brazil, but there are still many questions surrounding this tournament and the preparations for this tournament and what's going to be left in the wake of this tournament. Reading today, saw some people online talking about this. Airline flights being rerouted, routes being canceled, people's itineraries being just screwed by some of the transportation issues that Brazil has. Read something else that said in both Sao Paulo and Rio, there are subway issues. The subways are breaking down and there's fires and blah, blah, blah. Now, that may not have any impact on the World Cup, and we'll have to see. But it does speak to some of the internal infrastructure issues that Brazil has as they get ready to host the biggest sporting event in the world and welcome in hundreds of thousands of people who want to go and watch these games and don't really want to have to go through the hassle of 3-hour layovers when their original flight as booked was a direct flight. These are things that are going to be of interest to anybody traveling. And for those of us who will be sitting at home watching it on television, I want to make sure now, look, infrastructure and transportation and things that might inconvenience some people, that is a lesser concern than the real human element of this tournament and what kind of legacy it's going to leave and what kind of stage it will present for the populace of Brazil, who rose up during the Confederations Cup last year. What will they do? Again, just 14 days ago, reading those 100 Days to Brazil pieces from Grant Wall, from Wright Thompson, excellent writers who went to Brazil to get the temperature of the people, to talk about the differences between the upper middle class who are ready and excited and, hey, we can afford the tickets, and the rest of the population in Brazil whose main concerns, while they are excited and while they will cheer on their team, while their main concerns are, again, transportation, healthcare, all of these basic human rights. So we'll talk about that with Christopher Gaffney at 10:30. The biggest story that broke between yesterday and today, and hat tip to producer Vince from Toronto. You know him, you love him. Gave me credit for saying that something was going to happen between the end of the show yesterday and today that we were talking about. And it did. I have a gift. I said something would happen. And that thing that happened, revelations in the Telegraph, that Jack Warner took a bribe of $1.2 million, what seems to be a bribe, from Mohammed bin Hammam, presumably to help bin Hammam get the World Cup to Qatar in 2022. Now, this is going to require some additional investigation. This is going to require us to really sit and think about it. Because $1.2 million in Jack Warner's world is not a lot of money, guys. It's not. It's no surprise that Jack Warner took some money. It's no surprise that it was through spurious connections to bin Hammam's company. Well, we did some consulting for them. Here, give us $1.2 million. No surprises there. And at least this time, Jack was handed the money rather than having to steal it from FIFA funds that were supposed to go to building youth centers and fields in the Caribbean. So at least there's that. But this doesn't seem like enough to buy a vote. And remember, the United States was up against Qatar for that 2022 World Cup. No one really thinks that Jack Warner didn't vote for the United States when it came time. Now, this is the same thing that sort of inures Sepp Blatter to criticism on the Qatari front. That Sepp Blatter really didn't want it to go to Qatar, that he voted for the United States as well. And somehow that sort of insulates Blatter from being implicated in all of the shenanigans that are happening with Qatar. We all know they're there. And yes, I suppose that maybe a $1.2 million payment from Mohammed bin Hammam to Jack Warner looks like a bribe, and it looks like payment for a vote. But this is FIFA. This is the executive committee. Both of these guys were bigwigs. That sort of money passing between what amounts to friends, business partners, really doesn't mean anything. And I'll tell you this right now, for any of you that got a little excited, oh, Jack got caught with his hand in the till again. Here we go. This is going to get the World Cup stripped from Qatar. And guess what? The United States is prepared at the drop of a hat to host the World Cup. Clearly, we're on the short list. It's not going to happen until you see FIFA move, until you see charges brought against people that will require FIFA to honestly and seriously think about taking the World Cup from Qatar. It's not going to happen. They have gone through all of this up and down, back and forth about a winter schedule for one very simple reason. They're not going to take the World Cup from Qatar. It's not going to happen unless that country is not prepared, unless there is an epidemic that races through that country just before the World Cup and forces it to be moved. We're going to go to Qatar in 2022. I hope you're ready. I hope you got your sunblock. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. When we come back, Musa Okwonga will join us. We'll talk Manchester United. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined out by one of my favorite guests. Not that I particularly like bagging on Manchester United, although that's been the theme of the season, but the erudite Musa Okwonga joins us now. Hi, Musa.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going okay. Let's talk about Manchester United. Let's talk about your beloved Manchester United, who I did say at the start of the show, and while I have a sort of fundamental problem about the word crisis being used to describe football clubs, this certainly seems to apply in this case. Is Manchester United in crisis for you?
Well, it's a club with an unlimited worldwide income stream, so crisis is a relative term.
That's a good point. Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah, only because I want to be sensitive to anyone who's listening whose club might actually be in real financial danger. But in terms of managerial and footballing, I think the crisis is really for David Moyes, isn't it, if we're honest? And the crisis really it's a referendum on his judgment, I think, the next few games. And maybe a referendum on Alex Ferguson's judgment to choose the next, Moyes' successor, because obviously this hasn't turned out very well.
No, it has not. You're right. It is essentially a David Moyes crisis, and that allows. It's interesting because it allows United, and the word overnight here, but I'm sure yesterday in Britain is that the board has turned on Moyes and that they are considering letting him go. And I suppose that if we describe it as a Moyes crisis, it allows the club to sort of compartmentalize that one issue. And as you said, I mean, this is a club that is never going to be hurting financially. Right. $1 billion contracts and Chevrolet and everything else that they have going on. And so that allows. But I guess then the question is whether or not they can sort of lift David Moyes out of the club, remove him, replace him, and get back to any sense of normalcy. In a relatively short period of time, or how much of a shadow will his era cast? And I hate to say it like he's already gone, but I just don't see another resolution.
If you think about it, I mean, if you look at any other organization or walk of life, if Tim Cook had replaced Steve Jobs and hadn't done a good job, he'd have been out the door like 6 months ago. As it is, Tim Cook, after a rookie start, understandably, is now doing pretty well at Apple in terms of his performance, and the profits they're doing okay. And I think the same is true for Moyes. If you look at Moyes now, he has been given a certain amount of time, not necessarily to produce results, but to produce the indication that results will arrive in future. And from that perspective, when you look at it from that vantage point, you can't see him being there that much longer.
No, absolutely not. And it's, again, this has been a bit of a slow burn. I mean, we've been talking about David Moyes and the missteps he's made in this job since he took it, and since the summer transfer window opened, and he seemed to fumble about for a proper approach. And I guess that because it's been building upon itself, when you lose 3-0 to Liverpool in the manner in which they did.
Right, the manner is the thing.
And I think that's what the focus is. Clearly, it's not necessarily that they lost 3-0 at home to Liverpool. It's that they never looked competitive in that match.
Absolutely.
From your perspective, we can sort of analyze the whys they weren't competitive, but I suppose that's going all the way back to those personnel issues that we talked about.
But we can go into it, because if you look at the comments before the match saying that Liverpool were arriving at Old Trafford as favourites and United were underdogs. Okay, look, you could see that factually that was true, and even for him to concede it might have been acceptable if Liverpool were then faced by a ferocious onslaught from the first whistle. So he was almost saying, Liverpool are the favourites, almost to sort of goad them into, you've got to win at Old Trafford, how hard can it be? And then the second they come to Old Trafford, they unleash a whirlwind, which they didn't do. So that was the strange thing. It was like, you're telling Liverpool they should come here and expect to win, and then you're providing no real ferocity when they get here. So what really have you been doing in terms of motivation?
He doesn't seem to be following through on the logical path. If you're going to do these things, you're going to set these stages, then you have to put on the performance that you are, sort of, whether it's reverse psychology or whatever, however you want to.
Of course, there has to be a pride there. There has to be a pride, an aggression. there has to be a ferocity, there has to be a conviction, and there was none of that. Like beyond, and the really terrible thing is how some of the leading players of last year have regressed. So you look at Raphael, who arguably was the best right back in the Premier League last year, who I was talking about as a backup to Dani Alves in the Brazil squad. You know, you couldn't argue now that Raphael is even the top four. That, you know, Maicon, Dani Alves, Rafinha, you know, maybe Danilo, you know, these four right backs are already ahead of Raphael because he's actually regressed under Moyes. It's terrible. It's really terrible.
You know, when these things happen and when a team doesn't show up on the day, again, at home against a rival, the way that they didn't against Liverpool, the first instinct is, and because of everything that's happened, this is logical in a way, is to blame the manager and to say that he's lost the players. They really don't have any interest in playing for him at this point. We've had rumors of a dust-up in the dressing room. But the players deserve some responsibility as well.
They do, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
They do, but I have to jump in there because here's the thing. Liverpool have a bunch of very intelligent footballers. So do Manchester United. Now, here's the thing. If you give two teams of intelligent footballers vastly different instructions in how they should deploy themselves in key situations in matches, the team with the better instructions is going to win. Just because if you've got, you know, pre-programmed conditions to do X, Y, Z when X, Y, Z is in possession, you just execute automatically. And Moyes isn't giving people these structures. And because Brendan Rodgers is such a clever coach, he's a very clever coach, you need to be really, really smart in counteracting him. And Moyes, actually, you know, for all his supposed, you know, brilliance at being reactive and studying teams, didn't figure out remotely what Rodgers was doing.
Is there you know, you talk about Brendan Rodgers, and he has become such a shining light for Liverpool and has lifted them back up into a stratosphere that they had been struggling to reach for the last couple of seasons. How much of it is, I don't want to say dumb luck. I mean, clearly there's an evaluation process in place. And yes, Alex Ferguson played a major role in David Moyes getting appointed at Manchester United. But how much of it is sort of just, again, dumb luck in who you choose? Because if you're looking at resumes, if you're looking at CVs, I'm not sure that before they were hired, respectively, Rodgers and Moyes really were all that different. I mean, maybe in approach, maybe in attitude, but at least in terms of whether or not you respected them as coaches.
Well, look, I think that Rodgers had to earn respect because he wasn't there. You know, like Moyes, I think he'd bought himself a certain amount of time with the football he played at Swansea. He had played great stuff at Swansea. There was certainly an optimism around his appointment, but I think, you know, the first 6 months are vital, and you've got to start showing at least indications you're going to get it right. And he did do that. You know, they lost a couple of games pretty badly, but there were some performances that were really, really encouraging. And if you look at what Moyes has done so far, I would say the only two performances that have been really thrilling have been against Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League. But even those have been discredited because Bayer Leverkusen have been absolutely terrible in Europe this year, you know, at every possible opportunity. So you're right. Like, in terms of CVs, Moyes probably had a better CV, actually, because he'd done more in the Premier League. But here's the vital thing. The far more progressive outlook was that of Rodgers, and this is the most damning thing. You know, there are probably I hate to say, there are probably dozens of managers in Europe who, if they came into Old Trafford tomorrow, would have the team playing more progressive football. I have no doubts about that.
I just wonder if the conservatism of the Moyes choice is a function of the club. Rather than, I mean, it's easy to sort of lay this at the feet of those in charge and say, you picked the wrong guy. Now, right. In hindsight, you picked the wrong guy. Right. But at the time, I'm not going to say that everybody was on board with David Moyes taking over at Manchester United, but there was certainly enough there to say he makes sense. And again, maybe because of the nature of the club and because of Ferguson's tenure and how long he had been there, a more conservative appointment made sense. Whereas Liverpool, maybe a little bit more desperate, maybe looking for a star, new owners there, obviously, with Fenway Sports Group. Maybe that was all part of that.
You may be right. Let me go on the record. I actually supported Moyes' appointment when he took charge, because I said that, I'm not going to lie. I thought that, well, Ferguson might see something I haven't seen, just because he's Ferguson. And how many times has Ferguson looked at a player and identified qualities we ourselves didn't see? And if you look at like the Brendan Rodgers hire, you could draw an analogy with Theo Epstein at Boston Red Sox. Epstein came in at 30, great ideas, not really the track record, but was innovative and got things done. And I think, it's a broadly similar analogy, I think, in terms of the Boston team putting faith in someone young, brilliant, but untested.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Moyes appointment, it made sense in that, well, I suppose we're going on Ferguson's judgment. We were just saying, this is a guy who's been one of the world's premier managers for 26 years. And maybe he knows, well, more than along that, of 30 odd years, really, but Aberdeen as well.
Yes.
So what he must know what he's doing. How can we question the great Ferguson? I think that was a big part of it.
That is an interesting phenomenon that there's no reason not to trust Ferguson's judgment in that case.
Right.
But then you apparently we're at a point where, okay, he knows how to pick players. He certainly knows how to motivate players. He knows when it's time to let certain players go and reform his team. And obviously tactically he's been brilliant, but he's obviously not a great judge of who's going to be appropriate for the job that he did so well in for 20 years.
He is no recruitment consultant, that is for sure. That is absolutely sure.
Well, go ahead, sorry.
No, carry on.
Well, I was going to move us on to who does replace David Moyes should we get there, but if there is something else to be said, I mean, I feel like we're giving a eulogy for David Moyes and yet he is still in the job and
right.
I don't know. Certainly at most clubs, you could see tomorrow's game against Olympiacos and advancing in the Champions League as the litmus test for his position. But I don't know if that's the case at United or should be the case at United.
Well, look, I mean, I wrote a few days ago that what I think will ultimately decide this is market forces, not supporters. I honestly think market forces, because they're a public limited company, is what will actually decide Moyes' fate, because that share price is not going to go any higher with results like this. And as Miguel Delaney also wrote, sponsors also getting jittery as well about these results because they don't want to be associated with a club that is seen to be failing. They don't want to show their clients that or their customers that. So I think that's going to be the consideration. Olympiacos, I ultimately believe, if they do go further, they'll have a tough time in the next round, whoever they face, because this is not a vintage United team by any sort of stretch. But I think ultimately they're going to look at the numbers this summer and decide we can't afford to take this commercial risk.
Well, you said this summer, but that doesn't indicate that he might be fired after tomorrow.
I don't know what the inner workings are. I really don't know what the board is saying. I don't know directly what the board is saying. But it just seems to me that how can you give £150 million to somebody who you've already given 60 million to, and neither of those players have materially improved the team because either the tactics you've used or the fact you haven't built the team around them properly. And let's not even get to the Wayne Rooney contract, which I think was a mistake. I was concerned about it at the time. I was concerned about retaining him at the time. I thought they could actually have got maybe 2 or 3 players for the money they've spent on Rooney's new contract. They could have brought in 2 or 3 younger, hungrier players, not yet reaching their peak, who could have really done well for the club. But there you go.
It's at a point now where when we see reports that a senior player is slagging off Moyes in the locker room, we hear reports that he may have had a dust up with someone. When we hear the reports that the board has turned on him and is legitimately considering dismissal, it's all believable now. It all has smacks of truth, whether it is or not, because the situation has deteriorated to that point.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, just look at Van Persie's body language against Liverpool. There was a volley that he received late in the second half. It was a kind of long pass, the kind of Alex Song long pass that he would have, dispatched, the last couple of seasons, no problem. And he sort of limply shanked it into the crowd. And he just thought, there is just no fight in this team. There is no passion in this team. And the extra bit of desire is just not there. No one is galvanizing these people. And when you hear these stories, you can dismiss conspiracy theorists if they have no weight in the public eye, but these seem to really they're resonant. When these rumors come out, they really are resonant with what we're seeing on the pitch.
And when it gets to this point, and again, whether or not these reports are accurate is sort of immaterial to the notion that Moyes has lost a grip on anything. I mean, if he had any grip left, then it has gone, and it sort of snowballs into a situation where it's almost necessary to replace him because he doesn't have any credit left in his account. And again, let's sort of move to the notion that David Moyes is out, whether it's now or in the summer. From your perspective, where does the club turn? Because there are options, clearly. But again, my issue with, if we're going to go all the way back to when Ferguson retired and who was going to replace him, I had an issue with the transient nature of Jose Mourinho and that not fitting the character of United. I'm no United fan. Is there a possibility that United turns to a manager who probably won't be there more than a season or two just to bridge the gap to whatever they can do next?
Well, there's a lot of talk of Louis van Gaal, and there's talk of Jurgen Klopp as well. I think that you need to, whoever you go to, you need to get a manager who creates an infrastructure, whether that manager's there for 3 years or 5. And even if Rodgers was at Liverpool for 3 years and then got a much better offer somewhere else, he's the kind of manager who actually instills principles that can last beyond his tenure. And I think the key is this. I think the key is to get someone in on a 3-year contract, whoever that might be. And I think that either Van Gaal or Klopp would be excellent choices. Klopp would be more exciting because he's younger. There's the vitality there. The question is whether Van Gaal still has the fire to do the job, at that level. But I personally believe they'd both be excellent. And I think Van Gaal would be fantastic simply because if you look at his history of building infrastructures at successful clubs, then it's unparalleled. Ajax, Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Clubs in their own ways to manage, and he's brought in fantastic football and infrastructures that have lasted far beyond his tenure.
Van Gaal would be the choice in the aftermath of the World Cup, or I guess I'm wondering if there's a situation where Moyes is dismissed before this season ends, who steps into those shoes now?
Well, there was talk of Giggs, wasn't there?
Yes.
Giggs is the
which would be
manager.
That would be fascinating, and I would love to see it. I'm not sure it's the best scenario. I mean, I guess at this point, with expectations as low as they are, and sort of the performances being as poor as they've been, he probably can't do any worse. And if he's only
it'd be harmless. It's a harmless. I mean, some people would dismiss it, but actually, how many games are there left of the season? How many major competitions are United in apart from the Champions League? It really isn't that. There's not that much left to do, to be honest, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yes, I suppose you could give Giggs the caretaker job and then bridge the gap until the summer and either bring in Van Gaal or, as you said, Jurgen Klopp. And it's funny that in the past, in the last couple of seasons, anytime Jurgen Klopp's name has been connected with a move away from Dortmund or even specifically to England, there's sort of been this notion of why would he want to leave? Why would he want to leave Dortmund? But I can imagine him. I mean, I don't know the man, and I don't know that he's addressed this specifically. But why wouldn't he want the challenge of an opportunity like United?
Well, you look at Dortmund. I mean, look, I think they're 48 points behind Bayern Munich, and there's 23 points behind, 22 points behind.
It doesn't matter. It's the same thing.
So 23 points behind Bayern Munich.
Yes.
Bayern have got all the resources. They've taken Goetze, so they've taken Lewandowski, two of their best players, two of the world's best players they've taken the last season. Klopp, he can manage his ass off, but he doesn't have the resources to compete with Bayern. And to be honest, he's proven himself.
Yes.
Against Bayern. He's gone toe-to-toe with them. He's beat them on occasion in the league. He's almost beat them in the Champions League final. He's come close. So in a way, like a new challenge, a new infrastructure would be absolutely incredible. I think that someone like him would be superb. And the funny thing actually is that, the fact that the first person that United have been linked with, if Moyes does go, is Van Gaal, is interesting because it does show it does show an institutional conservatism. And I have recommended that Van Gaal would be a really good manager, so maybe I'm conservative myself to some extent. But it's interesting that they haven't gone, even now, the Moyes thing hasn't worked, the continuity thing hasn't worked. It's interesting that United still haven't gone, actually, let's go something completely different. Let's go for Klopp.
I suppose that's true. Yeah. But I mean, even Klopp, though, okay, not a safe bet. I mean, there's going to be some adjustment period, but, a great manager is a great manager, and he's proven, as you said, he doesn't have the resources of Bayern Munich, and yet he's been toe-to-toe with them until this season. Over the last couple of, and clearly it built something unique there at Dortmund. Now, does the character of the club matter? Because Klopp is directly tied in and is the personification of Dortmund in a lot of ways, and it's the love of the club, and it's sort of the people's club. Is that no offense to United, but they're not quite the people's club, Musa. Does that have? Would you think that would have any impact on Klopp's ability to adjust and come into the English game and be successful?
I think there are two Manchester Uniteds. There's the Manchester United of the the boardroom and the
Okay,
shareholders
fair enough.
and the vested corporate interests, and then there is the United with the the passionate away support.
Yes.
And that is the Klopp. That is the United that would embrace Jurgen Klopp, I think. So I think he would be absolutely fine. I think because he understands the key to managing a club like Manchester United is understanding the passion, understanding that it's more than just it's more than just what you win, it's how you win it.
Mm-hmm.
A thrilling attacking style. Actually, there's a question mark over whether Louis van Gaal has the defensive chops to manage as well as Klopp does, because Klopp's team defensively are superior to Van Gaal's. And the other thing about Klopp's appointment would be that he could probably tempt one or two of those great young players along with him. Someone like Gundogan or Royce, maybe either or both of them might go with him. Hummel, you never know if Klopp went to Old Trafford, and these are all hypotheticals because Moyes is still in the job,
right?
You could bring along young players too. So you never know. You never know how it could shake out. Yeah. I think personally, United fans would be happy with either of those in the summer.
Before I let you go, Juan on Twitter wants to know what he thinks, what you think United's first 11 will look like next year with Vidic leaving, Ferdinand likely leaving. I don't know if that's confirmed or not. Obviously, we don't expect Moyes to be there. Whether or not Van Persie pushes his way out the door, and his comments recently, in light of what's happened against Liverpool, who knows where that situation is now.
I can't believe that Van Persie is very happy at Old Trafford. I think that was the Dutchman doth protest too much. I think that was a step too far. If he said things are fine, it's a difficult season, but the fact he said very happy, I was like, nah, this sounds like a PR statement. Having said that, if Van Persie left in the summer, you couldn't begrudge him that, because he brought a league title to Old Trafford. Mm-hmm. The first 11 would be vastly different, because I don't expect Ferdinand would be a regular starter after the season, or Vidic for that matter. He hasn't been that regular this year, either Vidic. I think you'd have a centre-back partnership of Jones and Evans. You'd have the right-back of Raphael. The left-back, I think Evra's going to leave. They're saying that he might well go to Inter Milan. That's what the talk is, along with Vidic. So you have to bring a new left-back, because, frankly, Butner is not good enough to start. Probably even in the Premier League as a left-back, unfortunately. He's just not that standard. But the rest of the team is not vastly different. I think what's interesting is the future of Marouane Fellaini, because I don't think he's good enough for Manchester United, unfortunately. I know it might sound harsh. I know that he is the anchor of Belgium's defensive midfield, but I'm not sure, with the kind of fast passing style that Manchester United traditionally have used, not that he's not good enough, but he's not right. I don't think he slows the play down in transition too much, which is a real concern, I think. So yeah, that's also a challenge. But I don't think the front three will probably be Mata, Rooney, and Januzaj, with Welbeck off the bench.
There's still plenty of talent there to make a challenge.
There's plenty of talent.
It's a matter of refreshing in a couple of positions and finding a manager who maybe is more suited for the job, because apparently David Moyes is not that man. So go follow Musa Okwonga on Twitter, OKWONGA. Thank you for your time as always, Musa, and illuminating as always.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure's mine. Take care.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk to Christopher Gaffney, GeoStadia. We'll talk to him about the situation in Brazil as we head towards the World Cup. 86 days. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Joining me now via Skype, Christopher Gaffney. You can follow him on Twitter at GeoStadia. You can check out his website as well, www.geostadia.com, where he is chronicling many of the issues that are facing Brazil as they get ready to host the World Cup this summer. Christopher, how are you, sir?
Great, Jason. Glad to be back on the show.
I appreciate you joining me. Your appearance today wasn't, it wasn't brought on by anything specific happening. I don't have a single news item that I wanted to ask you about. I just felt that the timing was right. Just sort of check in with you, see where things are. We're getting down to, we're less than 3 months now from the World Cup, and all of the world's outlets are talking about the 100-day countdown. Now it's 86, and I don't know. I mean, I see the occasional item about an issue here, an issue there. Obviously, transportation is getting some run right now as we get closer. But in terms of the buzz and the buildup and sort of the feeling in Brazil about this World Cup, I mean, for lack of a better way of asking it, people excited, or is there a split of opinion?
I think there's a split of opinion, but everybody, depending on what your opinion of the World Cup is, I think everybody is ready to just get it going, to see what's going to happen. The social movements want to get on the streets. The government wants to get this behind them so they can get onto the elections. FIFA certainly wants to get out of Brazil as soon as possible and onto Russia. And I think we're all just kind of anxiously waiting to see what's going to happen. We keep getting these surprises from the government, from the cities, and we just, like at every turn, it's just more and more confusing. And so I think that the general sentiment, whether you're for or against the World Cup, is that let's just get to it and see what happens.
Nobody seems to really know, and I've got some comments here from Aldo Rebelo, who is the Brazilian sports minister. He recently said that he expects the protests to be very small, and he seems to be downplaying all of those elements, what we saw at the Confederations Cup, continuing into the World Cup. Is that propaganda? Is he trying to sort of assuage some fears out there? And do you really believe that what we'll see when we get to the summer are small protests?
Well, I think that there will be smaller protests than we saw last year at the Confederations Cup for a couple of reasons. One is that the police response was so violent that it's really scared a lot of people off the streets.
Okay.
The second reason is that there are a lot more police this time, and they've got way more arms and more of a mandate to stop protesters, whether they're peaceful protests or whether they're these so-called black bloc anarchist elements. And so I think that will also keep people off the street. And people want to watch the World Cup, and because every World Cup game in every city will have a holiday, people will have to stay home with their kids. It's not like they're going to, people aren't going to take their kids out into the streets to get tear gassed and shot at. Regarding the minister's comments, I think Aldo Rebelo is now turned into a marketer for the World Cup.
Okay.
And so he is spinning everything as much as he can, and he might have information I don't have, but I think he is one of the most disconnected people from reality that's emerged out of this World Cup scenario.
Go ahead. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
Well, he actually said the other day in responding to criticisms from journalists about Brazil's preparations, he basically said, well, we've won the World Cup 5 times and we've produced great footballers. What more do you want from us? And so he set the bar so low that he just walks over it every day as he goes to work.
Interesting.
And so it's kind of a sad fall from a place of dignity that he used to have, but he's lost all credibility and is now parading around in Nike gear, selling the World Cup as much as he can.
You mentioned the black bloc element. Some of those 100 days of the World Cup pieces, I may be getting them confused, but certainly Wright Thompson at ESPN and I believe Grant Wall as well have mentioned those elements. I think it was Wright Thompson who sort of painted them as, kids with too much time on their hands, or kids with these this notion of being chaotic and causing trouble, but not really having a philosophy or a goal in mind. Is that the sense in Brazil, that the Black Bloc is really just a bunch of troublemakers who don't really have a direction?
I think that's general sense, and I think that Wright Thompson's piece, I think he actually called it a clown show.
He might have.
Where they're listening to Beyonce and such as they're getting ready to go fight the police. But you can imagine the scenario of poor kids from suburbs, much like the poor kids in the suburbs of France or whatever, with little to do in school, very low employment opportunities, and the chance to express their dissatisfaction with the status quo, whatever that is, with just adolescent angst, basically. Of course, this adolescent angst extends well into the 20s and 30s in some cases. But when we're looking at what the Black Blocs are doing, they're just groups of friends, typically middle to lower class kids that are just out to have a fight with the military police. And differently from the police that go into the favelas and let loose with live ammunition, the police that are confronting the protesters are not using live ammunition. So these kids basically know that they're not going to die, and they might get a couple scars to chat about while they're drinking beers later. But it seems to be just kind of lashing out at a general sense of alienation.
Now, you wrote in your most recent post at geostadia.com that there are flights being canceled and there are no-fly zones around 7 kilometers around these stadiums on game days as a measure to prevent noise, and that this is having sort of a ripple effect through the Brazilian air travel infrastructure. And I've seen, not that they're complaining necessarily, they're sort of just noting it, but I've already seen some pretty notable soccer journalists saying, I went from a direct flight on my itinerary to a 3-hour layover. How big of an issue is that going to be, the air travel in Brazil?
It's going to be a huge issue, a massive issue. At one time, the Brazilians are adding a lot of flights to deal with demand, the perceived increase in demand. But the second time, they've canceled all these flights for 7 hours on game days within a 7-kilometer radius. They say it's for security, but why a 7-kilometer radius and not a 10-kilometer radius? If you're talking about a no-fly zone, why not a 25-kilometer radius that would give you time to scramble a jet or something to take out a terrorist threat? And so, to my mind, this is clearly just about FIFA's transmission requirements to have silence in and around urban space. And the journalists and everybody that bought their tickets months ago trying to get ahead of the price gouging are all suffering these huge inconveniences. Why did Brazil decide to announce this now, less than 3 months to the World Cup, when they could have announced, they knew this was going to happen, they could have announced it 6 months ago to deal with all these eventualities? And so this kind of lack of foresight, lack of preparation, lack of planning, especially in the aviation sector, is going to cause headaches for everyone that comes to Brazil for the World Cup.
No, we were talking about the Wright Thompson piece, and I keep referencing it because it was, because he's an amazing writer, and it did seem to capture something about Brazil as they head towards this World Cup. And clearly he there are parts of the country that are ready for this and excited about the World Cup, and there are elements in the country that are less excited, even if they love their football. And one of the things he talked about was one of the gentlemen he focused on who has become a protester and has taken up the cause of that movement, Ivo Herzog, I believe. His father had been killed during the military dictatorship, and he believes that killing was incited by I think it's Jose Maria Marina, I may have his name wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Who is the head of the organizing committee for the World Cup. And I wanted to ask you, because I think that this is something that Americans might miss in a lot of ways. The shadow of the military dictatorship, which didn't end officially until 1985, how much of a legacy does that have? And how much of this is sort of, obviously with this gentleman in charge of the World Cup organizing committee, a sort of, well, we're just going to pretend none of that happened. Yeah, well,
the legacy from the military dictatorship is still very, very strong in Brazil. We're right now approaching in March, the end of March, the 50th anniversary of what the military people call the Revolution for Democracy, which instituted the military dictatorship. During the military dictatorship, The O Globo television network, which is Brazil's biggest television network, gained hugely, as well did all of the civil construction firms that are now basically running Brazil. This includes all of the developments for airports, the Maracanã, the Corinthians Stadium. They're all run, all the construction projects are done by these companies that really gained their footing under the massive building projects undertaken during the military dictatorship. The third element is that we have unreformed people like José Maria Marin, who was in the pocket of the military dictatorship and actively screaming for the heads of journalists like Herzog, who was tortured and disappeared, that are still in charge of Brazilian sport. They're still lurking around in the background of the federal government. And then we have the other disturbing element is that we have a military police system in Brazil. We don't have police like we have in North America, which are city police that go around and actually police cities. It's as if the National Guard were in charge of policing of Brazilian cities, or American cities in the case. And so we have this unreformed police system from the military dictatorship that is still a military police system. And so all of these things together cast a huge shadow over what goes on in daily life in Brazil, and certainly in the way that the World Cup is being directed.
Very interesting. I mean, this is obviously a complicated country. Brazil is a big country. So much of the focus has been on the growing economy of Brazil and therefore a growing power in the world. And with the World Cup now and then the Olympics coming up in 2016, and that's something as well that you mentioned, you sort of went over it and I glossed over it, and I apologize. There are holidays in these cities for each of these World Cup game days, and that is going to halt construction on the projects which are supposed to prepare the country for the Olympics in 2016. That seems like Brazil's shooting itself in the foot.
Well, yeah, the whole World Cup Olympic project, and specifically in Rio, is one. I don't think we have any feet left. We've shot them so frequently; they're so full of holes that we're like Swiss cheese feet. The mayor issued a decree last Wednesday stopping all public works projects between May 18th and July 22nd. Or May 22nd and July 18th, which is 2 months of all public work projects, including Olympic projects, that have to stop. Rio is already racing against the clock to get the Olympic projects done. But then, I wonder, what are the people who work on these projects going to do for those 2 months? Not only are there public holidays on every game day in every city where the World Cup is held, all Brazil's games are also de facto public holidays in every city where, wherever Brazil is playing, there's a de facto holiday in that city. And so we've had a late carnival. We just really started the year in Brazil 2 weeks ago. We have 3 months to go to the World Cup. Everybody's anxious, but then everything has to stop again. And then we're into an election cycle. And so it's a really bad time to stop everything that goes on, especially in Rio de Janeiro, for the World Cup. And this is just the way the thing's going. And if the black blocs are a clown show, then the organization of the World Cup is doubly so.
There's an element of Brazilian culture that I mentioned this to you before we came on the air that seems to get kind of pushed to the sidelines, and it's it's a function of the kind of country Brazil has become, an economic power and a consumer culture, that kind of thing. But I saw a piece today. This is at netnewsledger.com, and not a website I was aware of before. But it's about an Amazonian Indian who went and wanted to take a picture with the World Cup trophy, had a T-shirt that said "Brazil, stop destroying Indians." How much of a regular conversation is there about the Indian population of Brazil, the loss of rainforest? I mean, clearly that's an environmental cause that the world has taken up. But how much of that conversation is actually happening in Brazil? And is there an opportunity to put it back on a stage that the world will recognize with the World Cup coming?
But it's, of course, an incredibly complicated question that Brazil has yet to really face honestly. I think that the general attitude of people in government is that the Amazon needs to be exploited for its natural resources. And so you can cut it down to grow soy and beef and other export-oriented crops. The same with the hydroelectric dams such as Belo Monte in the state of Pará in the north, that these massive projects underway have really incredibly irreversible damaging effects on indigenous people and their cultures and their spaces where they live. And I don't think that the World Cup is going to do anything to reverse that kind of conquest of the Amazon by Brazil's economic desires. In the case, the case in point for this, I would say, is even in the cities where there were indigenous presence, such as the Maracanã, which had the old Indian museum,
right,
which instead of investing, say, even $1 million into this museum to make it a showcase for indigenous culture, the idea was to just destroy it. And the Indians there were expelled. And what the Rio de Janeiro Secretary of Sport and Leisure said was that the place for Indians is in the forest. And that's why we're protecting the Amazon, so they can live in the forest. And so it's like there's still this association of indigenous cultures with the natural environment, and they're kind of made into these happy animals that live in the forest instead of having full agency as people. And this is something that the World Cup is not addressing, and there continues to be incredible violence against indigenous people who are fighting for the rights to stay on their lands.
Last question I have for you, Chris. I saw that Sepp Blatter has canceled any opening speeches at the ceremonies to start the World Cup this summer, probably in response to the fact that Dilma has been booed in her speeches about this tournament or in general. Is there any surprise there? I mean, is that something that Blatter is sort of, without acknowledging it, recognizing that there is a problem with this World Cup?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's an accurate assessment. I think Blatter, when he doesn't have his foot in his mouth, what comes out of his mouth is not really helping the cause of FIFA or the World Cup. And so hopefully his handlers have realized that he could be and the thing that he hates most, as Andrew Jennings is always keen to say, is being booed.
Right.
And no one likes being booed, but Blatter has a special distaste for it. And so I think that FIFA is going to try to minimize their presence. I think even in the advertising and such, that FIFA is going to be as much in the shadows, or at least the dignitaries of FIFA, if you can call them that, are going to be as much in the shadows as possible to avoid the kind of public exposure that Blatter's little escape maneuver has guaranteed. So he's afraid, and I think the government's afraid of public reaction.
Says all you need to know right there. Christopher Gaffney, go follow him on Twitter, GeoStadia. Go read his website, www.geostadia.com, for constant updates on what's happening in Brazil. I believe you're headed to Zurich eventually. When is that happening, Chris?
January 2015.
All right, so we will have you there through the World Cup. We'll have Chris in Brazil through the World Cup, where he will be giving us incredible insight, as always. Thank you for your time, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, bye-bye.
Cheers.
There goes Chris Gaffney. Fantastic follow, fantastic website that gives you, again, sort of an insider's look. I mean, Chris is obviously an American living down there, working down there, but he is in tune with what's happening in Brazil. All of these myriad forces that are pushing against each other as we head towards the World Cup. And I guess the analogy that came to mind while he was talking about FIFA and the dignitaries remaining in the shadows, the better to avoid the scorn of the people, is that this is essentially going to be like a stage production, that the World Cup will happen front stage. It'll happen, in front of the curtain, and then behind the curtain, backstage where no one can see them. That's where FIFA will lurk, raking in their billions of dollars, raking in the money that helps them be what they are. And clearly, in light of the new revelations about Jack Warner, which surprised no one, in light of the fact that more and more evidence is showing that Qatar World Cup was purchased, and you have to wonder about Russia's World Cup as well. Despite all of that, they're going to continue to do what they do until they are called to the carpet. There's no oversight. There is no one policing FIFA. And when those rare occasions happen, when they are dragged in front of some sort of tribunal or the Swiss authorities start to look into things, there's a way around it. They smooth things over with a little bit of money or a plea, or we'll do this, we'll do that. It's not going to stop. I just don't see an end. I don't know how it's going to stop. It's not going to stop. Let's say this. Okay. Here's the way it's going to stop. If anybody has an issue with the way the World Cup is being run in Brazil, with the fact that Qatar was handed a World Cup and it's going to be 1 billion degrees, or we're going to have to move it to winter or whatever, or that Russia was handed a World Cup for 2018 in spite of their issues, then it's going to be incumbent upon the most powerful associations in FIFA to pull out, to protest, to step aside, to boycott. That's what it's going to take. And you tell me which one of these associations has the cojones to step aside and say, we're not going to go to the World Cup. We're not going to participate in any FIFA activities for a while because you guys need to straighten up. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And even if you want to put it on America to somehow be the driving force, you want your country to be the one, the standard bearer who stands up and says, this is not right. We're going to make it better by our own actions. Steel Galati wants to reform FIFA from the inside. That's where he sees the most impact, from the inside, now that he's an executive committee member. And you have multinational corporations originating and based here. They're not going to pull out because U.S. Soccer might. American Express, Coca-Cola, IBM, whoever else is I don't know who else is a FIFA or who is a FIFA sponsor, but all of those gigantic multinationals that are FIFA sponsors, they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the moment has come. Stuart Holden will join us, sit in for the last half hour. It's a fantastic Tuesday edition of Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Stay there.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, very excited. Very excited to welcome Stuart Holden and Toby. Toby's there too. Guys can see Toby. Toby's on the show. I told Stu before we came on the air, completely bum rushed him with this. Our listeners here at Soccer Morning were fantastic. You set the bar too low, Stu. 50 retweets. Come on, man.
I know, that was easy.
That was nothing.
Let's crush that in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. So now you know. Do not underestimate the Soccer Morning audience. Ended up with 250. My producer tells me. So that's good. Thanks a lot for doing that, listeners. Stu's here. We're gonna address again. We're gonna address Stu and what's going on with him, and everybody congratulate Stu on his engagement. Very exciting news in the life of Stuart Holden. But we're gonna get into some other stuff. Ask your opinion about some news happening in the soccer world. But before we do that, let people know what's going on with Stu Holden and the knee and everything else.
Yeah, I'm in California right now doing my rehab. I had my surgery last Monday, and we're actually staying at a friend's place out here for a couple weeks and just getting on the mend. Really, the first part's pretty slow. I'm on crutches for about another week, which once I'm off those, it starts flying by. So just ready to get back on the horse, man. I'm it was obviously a setback, disappointing for me personally, and a lot of emotions were flying around. But I'm well and truly feeling like I'm ready to do this thing again. You definitely got people in your corner, and a lot of people, when we put out the Ask Stu Twitter hashtag, a lot of people ask, how do you keep your spirits up? How do you be positive, Stuart Holden, with everything that you've been through? Yeah, I think just because it's the way I was raised, but it's all the people and friends and things that I have in my life that make me realize that I'm fortunate to be in the position I am. And obviously it's frustrating when you keep asking yourself why do you keep having these setbacks, or why is it another big injury after big injury? And I continue to fight. I'm a warrior, and that's my mentality. I won't give up, because I know I still have a lot left to give the game. And I know that my work ethic, my mentality, that'll all get me there again. And I'm fully confident in my medical team and the people that I'm working with, that they can get me back to that where I'll be playing again with no problems. Let me ask you, while I have the opportunity here, and obviously you'd love to be back on the field helping them out, but what's the feeling around Bolton right now with where they are in the championship and trying to get back to the Premier League and being the club that everybody knows they can be? Yeah, it's obviously been a plight of instances of we got relegated from the Premier League, and then we found the first year in the championship pretty tough, and the second a little more so. We started off pretty slow, and things weren't really going our way, but I think we finally started to turn that corner a little bit, where the guys are buying into the philosophy of Dougie Freedman, and we won 3 of our last 4 games, and although we lost on the weekend, I think it's going to turn around. I think we've pretty much. I might be the only second one left from the team that was in the Premier League, so we've had quite a turnover, and it's taken a little bit of time for guys to adjust. But I think as that happens, we're gonna have a good run at it next year and make a good promotion a good push for promotion into the Premier League. What's that like? A club like Bolton goes down, and as you said, kind of just a fact of life in the championship, that you got to clear the roster out a little bit, that you got to bring in some new guys, and a lot of the guys that were in the Premier League have the opportunity to move on in their contracts if relegation happens. How big of a just a explosion of activity is that when that happens? Yeah, it's tough because it's coming. It's no secret that guys are on bigger money in the Premier League, and when you come down to the championship, at least you get a little bit of parachute payments the first year, but after that, there's a significant drop off, and it's in the best financial interests of the club to try and move a few people on, or try and bring a few people in on not as much money, and then it becomes a bit of a balancing act. And it's tough at times because you're trying to bring in some players that aren't as sure about, or maybe aren't of the same quality as the ones you previously had. I mean, it's hard to say really because especially in our situation, we've had a significant turnaround, but I wouldn't say that the quality has dropped off that much because we do have a good squad of players, and I still see it in training, and guys are still hungry and sharp, and the main goal is we want to get back to the Premier League. Nobody on the team is happy being in the Championship, so to have that drive, that determination, and that kind of spirit around the place, it really goes a long way.
I'm just going to take the opportunity to ask you about all your clubs. I'm going to start that way. So let's talk about the Houston Dynamo. 2 wins in 2. Will Bruin's on fire. I might have underrated them a little bit coming into the year, Stu, and I shouldn't, because one of my mantras is never doubt Dom Kinnear. And
yeah,
they look
neither. Trust me,
they look legit. I mean, is this you have your eye on Houston? I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, my brother actually was with Houston during preseason, and that didn't really work out in the end. But he was telling me how good the team was looking, and that Dom really had it was a good preseason, and Dom being Dom, we all know that he's a good coach, and I'm very thankful for his influence on my career and him helping me to get to the next level. There's Carolyn jumping in the back.
There you go.
I think that the Dynamo every year will be a force, and it's great to see. I think Will Bruin maybe struggled a little bit the second half of last season after he came back from the Gold Cup, and that was harder for me to watch because I saw him every day during the Gold Cup, and he was training hard and he was working hard. He had a great attitude about it, and I really feel that he's a good player that leads the line well for the Dynamo. So it's great to see him get off to a good start this season, and I think if he can continue that type of form and he has the support of the guys around him and Giles Barn and Boniak's a heck of a player, I think they'll be all right.
It's just that MLS keeps changing, and it's changed. It doesn't seem like that long ago that you left, and yet this league seems very different in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't just mean in terms of stadiums and crowds and stuff like that, but the type of players. I mean, Michael Bradley signing for Toronto was a bombshell. Stu, were you as surprised as everybody else?
Yeah, I was shocked. But I'm really happy for Michael. It seems like he's taken that role, and embracing it. And I watched their first game against Seattle, and they look like a pretty decent team. Toronto. It's amazing what 1 year will do.
Absolutely. When you drop
$100 million,
yeah, you drop $100 million, and you got Tim Leiweke. And actually, okay, I won't do this. I know there's a sore spot with Houston fans being sort of AAG's second club, and I don't know if you felt that while you were playing for the Dynamo and how much that was actually talked about, say, in the locker room. But you do get the sense that if Tim Leiweke gave the attention that he gave to LA and now Toronto to the Dynamo, who knows what could have happened down there? Yeah,
I know. But you know what? The Dynamo, even stemming back to the days when they were in San Jose, it was always kind of known that that team wasn't obviously the marquee franchise, and it was always kind of gave us a little chip on our shoulders, and I think that helped us in some ways. And I was a part of the team that won the championship, the first two in 06 and 07, and that was an unbelievable feeling.
We've got that Twitter hashtag rolling, and I feel like I'm ignoring all of our listeners if I don't get to some of these. I'm gonna have to pick and choose. There's too many for me to go by order, guys. So just bear with me. Let's see. Nick in Toledo says, "What stadium in England was your favorite place to play?" We'll say outside of the Reebok.
Well, yeah, obviously outside of the Reebok, because there's no better feeling than playing at home. And but I think I would say. Either when I was on loan at Sheffield Wednesday, I had a good time. My first game, I remember how loud the fans were. Mm-hmm. But I think I'll never forget my Premier League debut at White Hart Lane. Wow. And that was just kind of a really cool experience. The fans are so close to the pitch, and they're so loud, and they're constantly on your back. And even though I think we lost 3-0 that game, maybe, but it was. I still remember it was a phenomenal experience. I think I was playing right mid for the start. Bale was playing left back and just bombing on past me every 2 minutes, and I remember stumbling off the field after that, thinking like, all right, this is what this is what the level's like in England.
Yeah, no, that guy's the most expensive player in the world. There you go.
Yeah.
Any of these you want to pass on, feel free to pass. I'm gonna spit them out. You're not under no obligation to answer them. Let's see. This one. Someone asked. Oh, here it is. Freddie Shires, dirtiest player you ever played against. Will you answer that one?
Yeah, I think that one's kind of obvious.
Oh, okay.
I won't answer that one.
You know, and not to make this all about your injuries and what you dealt with, but some people, I've had somebody ask me earlier or put it out there for you. You know, do you feel any ill will to Johnny Evans, to Nigel de Jong for some of the things that have happened in your career? I mean, you know, we all know injuries happen on the field, but there's got to be a sense that guy could have pulled out. He didn't have to go in with that tackle.
Yeah, it's more frustrating than anything. I think, you know, and it's easy, I think, to harbor those feelings, you know, and think about it and think what if, and think, you know, why did he do that, and, you know, be angry and upset. And I think those are all natural, and I definitely have felt those feelings over the last couple of years, especially as I've suffered setback after setback. But, you know, I've learned in my life not to dwell on those things, and there's nothing that can be done to change them. So, you know, why be this angry little man crawled up in the corner, just pouting and you know, thinking back at what could have been and being angry at people for things that they've done, because, you know, I've done things in the past that I'm not proud of, and you know, we deal with it, we move on, and that's the way I look. I'd rather look forward and not have that negative energy in my life, and just focus on me and getting back healthy and dealing with those setbacks and those injuries that are thrown my way.
How many times as a player, sort of kind of branching off of that, how many times have you gotten done with a game and you hit the locker room and you think back to that one tackle, and maybe you were carded, maybe you weren't, maybe it was a foul, maybe it wasn't, and you kind of go, oh, I can't believe I did that. Like, how often did that happen for you?
Not that often.
Okay, so you're not that guy. We know that.
Yeah, I'm a midfielder. I'm a playmaker. I'm not the dirty guy on the field.
But you know, you could get stuck in when you had to still.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few tackles that maybe then I've thought, oh, for sure I'm winning the ball here, and somebody's got a toe on it and they've nicked it away, and you end up, you know, going through somebody, and you don't mean it per se, but it is part of the game. Some tackles not so much as part of the game, but, you know, it's a decision sometimes you have to make in less than a second, and you know, it's kind of a blood rush type situation.
Yeah, I think it's easy for fans, and a lot of people have played, but certainly not at the level you have, for us to sort of stand here in judgment and go, can't believe he did that, what a hideous challenge. And yeah, I guess if you should get your studs up or something like that, it's obvious, but occasionally it's a matter of that split second, as you said. All right. Yeah. Wolves are cool. Okay. Great name. Wants to know who the best player you've ever played alongside was.
Ooh, played alongside. I don't know. I played alongside some players that I think are pretty dang good. Gary Cahill who's now at Chelsea. When we played at Bolton, he was a really good player. You know, I think Michael Bradley is up there. You know, Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan. They're all really good players that I would consider, you know, world class in that sense. And you know, I look. It's fun when you play with these good players, and then you're able to look around and watch them play and see their successes. Because, you know, I wish everyone that I've played with or against the utmost success. You know, it's all in the better of the game, and you know, you see now all this quality in players that are playing in MLS, and it's bringing up the level here.
Juan Vieira wants to know if you've ever thought about coaching. Is that something that you thought about for after your career?
I've been asked that a few times, and, you know, I'm not sure. I'm on the fence in that sense, and I still find it hard to think about coaching when I consider myself an active player, but. You know, I think if the right opportunity presented itself, I would definitely consider it. I think I see myself more getting into, you know, the media side of the game or the front office type work. And in that sense, I still I have a lot of passion projects that I do outside of soccer and little entrepreneurial type things and on the tech side. And that's kind of where my passion is, I think. But I still want to be involved with soccer no matter what, and it's the game I love, and it's a game that I love to see growing in the U.S.
You sound a lot like Landon on that. I mean, I've never spoken to Landon directly, but I know that he's sort of said, I'm not really the coaching type, and I know he's done a little bit of media. We see what Tim Howard's doing in it with calling games when he's not playing for Everton. Have you ever had those conversations with those guys? I mean, with Tim or with Landon or if anybody else, sort of, how do we transition into media? What you're going to do? How are you going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few opportunities already. A few people asking about Brazil, and I'll probably do a few things around the World Cup, and it's always good to keep that stuff fresh. The more practice you can get, the better you can get. I've done quite a bit of work in the past when I've been injured, and just hopped on the TV here and there. And you find the more you do it, the more confident you get in front of the camera. In that sense, as opposed to being interviewed and being on the other side, it's kind of a unique transition, and it's stuff that I enjoy doing. So I'll continue to do that as long as I'm playing, and in time that I have available, it's important to make the best use of that, and something to keep my mind busy while I'm going through rehab again.
While we're the show is live, and part of the deal is we respond to stuff that's getting out there right now. Grant Wall is reporting that Julian Green, the German-American player at Bayern Munich, is going to train with the U.S. ahead of their Mexico game. I think that game is in April, which is a big deal. Stu, I'm sure you are aware that American soccer fans are really intent on getting all those dual internationals to play for the U.S. You were a dual international. You could have played for Scotland as well as the United States, and ultimately we know your choice. What's that like? I mean, I don't know how heavily Scotland, quote unquote, recruited you, but what's it like having that choice and maybe having family pulling you in a bunch of different directions when ultimately it could have a major impact on your career? Yeah,
I think that process would have been a little bit more intense for me had I been playing in England earlier, because I think at that time when I was coming up in the MLS and the youth national teams in the U.S., I wasn't really seriously looked at by Scotland. I know they said they sent someone to watch one of my games, but they were never in touch. And for me, it was a no-brainer to play for the States. And I didn't, in that sense, I felt I moved in the U.S. when I was 10.
Right.
So I'd been living pretty much the majority of my life in the U.S. Up to that point, and played through the youth ranks at U20 national team, all the regional teams, the ODP stuff, and had gone to college there. So for me, it was a no-brainer. When Bob called me up for the Gold Cup in 2009, I accepted in a heartbeat, and couldn't wait to put on the U.S. jersey and represent what I consider home now.
And I wonder, just sort of, I mean, look, we had when the hex started and the United States went down to Honduras, and I think it was Honduras, and got beat. And Brian Strauss of then the Sporting News wrote a piece that sort of indicated there were some problems in the locker room. Part of it may have been the German contingent. Is that something you notice? I can't recall how many German Americans were on the Gold Cup team, Stu, but is there a real sense that there's sort of a difference between guys that grew up here and guys that didn't? Is there any problem with any of that?
There's a difference in cultures. I mean, that's obvious, but no, I mean, honestly, the Gold Cup roster, specifically, the team camaraderie. I'm just talking about the Gold Cup here because I felt that was a great tournament. But I mean, the qualifiers before, when we had the A team, the quote A team there for the World Cup qualifiers, the team spirit, the banter, the camaraderie it was all there, and it was phenomenal. I think that summer we went undefeated. We won however many games. I think it was like 15 in the end on that streak. And I can honestly say that was one of the most fun groups I've been a part of. And I even had some of the younger guys after the Gold Cup saying, "Can the Gold Cup be every year?" Because that was so much fun. And the traveling around the U.S. and you're in it together, for 6 weeks of just intense training, intense playing games every couple of days, and it's a great experience. And to culminate that with a torn ACL, the Gold Cup trophy was a fantastic way to end that tournament. Obviously, I wish it could have ended a little better for me, but
right.
I still think back and about that tournament and that how much I enjoyed it, and it's definitely up there in my career.
We had Landon Donovan putting on shades in the corner. It doesn't get any more fun than that, I don't think.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm gonna kind of talk again, bring us back to sort of your English experience and your insight into sort of the cultural differences. And I've got a story here about Jason Kreis, who's spending 6 months in Manchester with Manchester City to sort of learn their ways as he gets ready to coach New York City FC. But I also I'm going to bring up Breck Shea. I don't want you to comment directly on Breck Shea. But I am curious about the differences. Obviously, you had been in England before. When you went to Bolton, that wasn't your first rodeo. But for a guy like Breck Shea, born and raised in Texas, came up in MLS, was a star in MLS. When he makes that move, just sort of from an outsider's perspective, but a guy who knows England, how difficult is that adjustment?
It's tough, and I spent quite a bit of time with Breck when he was over there. Myself and Jeff, and he lived close to me in Manchester, and I would say it's tough because Brett came by himself, and he's a little bit younger, and it's a completely new cultural experience for him, and obviously he's coming from MLS and Texas, which is home for him, to Stoke, England, and goes from there to living on his own and playing at a team that's part of the biggest league in the world. So, it's a huge adjustment for you both culturally and your lifestyle and, then the pressure of playing at that type of club. And I think he came in with a little injury, struggled with form at first, and then got criticized. And, then he picked up another injury, and it didn't really start that well for him. And then obviously your confidence is a little bit hurt during that. So, I had a long opportunity to talk to Breck at the Gold Cup, and I really felt that, he'd gotten through that tournament. He scored in the final, had really started to turn himself around again, was back to the Breck that we all have seen and know what he's capable of. And then it was a little bit of a bummer because he picked up another injury in preseason. So, Breck is a very talented player, and I think that as he adjusts to the culture over there, which I think he is now, and you make some more friends, and your family come over and visit, and it's all part of integrating yourself into British culture and finding your groove in a sense, and making sure that you're comfortable off the field, because then if you're not comfortable off the field, then you're not going to perform well on it. Yeah. And it's a process at first to figure that out and figure out your new surroundings. And it looks like he's hopefully going to get that all together and get playing and make the World Cup team.
I certainly got talent. The Jason Kreis, the piece in the New York Times about Jason Kreis and his experience, talk specifically about sort of the differences in soccer culture. Is there a major difference in training and approach in sort of, obviously, look, England's got an infrastructure that the United States can't compete with, especially when it comes to clubs and academies and that kind of thing. But is there a major difference in sort of the way they approach training and preparation? And then, what's their perception of the American way of doing things? Because at one point, Jason Kreis is quoted as saying, "They asked me if we train every day," like they expected American players not to be training every day.
Yeah, I think sometimes people underestimate the quality of the league and the MLS, and I get asked about it all the time. And that kind of question of do they train every day? Of course we do. It's a serious thing over here. It's a serious league. It's gonna one day compete with the best leagues in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing for me was we trained hard in Houston. Training was very competitive under Dominic Kinnear, and we had a lot of winners on the team, and every day was intense, and you didn't want to lose. The game of 5-a-side, the game of 6v6 after practice. It was like nobody wanted to lose that. It was almost like the game on Saturday. So. Mm-hmm. I think when I got to England, though, I realized how cutthroat it is, and how guys are training every day to win a position for Saturday. And if the guy that maybe is number 3 at your position, he's there at practice trying to show the coach that he should be ahead of you every day, and it doesn't allow you to let your guard down. And it's a tough thing, but it's a good thing because it pushes you to higher heights. And I found that, I think, my first year when I got there, and I realized that, I was going to have to work hard to earn a position. And once I earned that position, I was going to have to work even harder to keep it. And, I really think that took me to a higher level as a player. I really felt that year in 2010, 2011, I was playing the best soccer in my career. And, I was being pushed by my teammates. So, it's something you're thankful for, but at the same time, it's that you can't let your guard down because someone right there waiting to take your spot.
Yeah, and this is why Jurgen Klinsmann is constantly harping on Americans to go to Europe and get into that environment. All right, we got a couple of minutes left. I got to get to some more of these asks, too. Otherwise, I'm going to feel terrible about it. This one, I'm asking because I find it hilarious. Are you going to get married in a kilt? Is that a the thing you have to do? Okay,
sure. Actually, Kara, they asked if I'm getting married in a kilt. she said it has to be the right type of kilt.
Okay, and follow up from Doug Bartow. He says, "Which tartan will you wear?" I know the tartan is the pattern. I'm not familiar enough with Scottish culture, but I imagine that's important, right?
Yeah, which tartan?
Yeah, I don't know. What does that mean exactly?
Well, the tartan on your kilt, the pattern, the clan,
all right,
your family clan. But apparently, according to Kara, my kilt's gonna have to match the wedding decoration. So
wait,
it's gonna narrow down my choices.
You have to color coordinate your tartan. Okay, that's gonna be that's gonna be fun. A couple of people here on Twitter, and I don't want to pick out one because there's been several people who have asked. Said I've had an injury. I've torn my ACL. Do you have any advice for especially young players who have suffered an injury like that as they try to get back on the field?
Sorry, I just had a text from Mike McGee asking me an Ask Stu question.
Well, I'm sure it's inappropriate. It's probably inappropriate. Yeah.
As far as ACL advice, I'm a repeat offender, but it's just important to do your rehab right and work on the mechanics and look at the way that you injured your knee the first time and sort out you get all your strength back and don't rush anything. And I certainly didn't do that I did do that the first time. I did everything. I look back at my injury and obviously I'm frustrated that I re-injured it, but I know that I did everything right in my program so that and the people around me were all convinced that everything was great, and so was I. So that was obviously frustrating, but sometimes these things happen. But so just keep going and work hard, and don't let yourself get down, and take care of your body while you're injured because you can't do the things that you were doing when you were injured. So you have to change your diet. You have to change the things you're doing every day, and you'll get back there. It's not the end of the world.
Nope. There you go. Last question here. How long did you date Carolyn West before you proposed? I would have proposed on the second date and blown it. This is from Mr. SON_soccer. So I guess some I don't know. I guess he wants to know how do you woo a beautiful woman, Stu? You want to get some advice on that?
Yeah, we got introduced through a friend. So I don't think I would have had a chance if I tried to go up to her in a bar. I'd have been fumbling my words, but. But we dated about two and a bit years, and we just got engaged last week, so it's pretty exciting.
There you go. Congratulations again on the engagement, and congratulations to Kara as well. Stu Holden, amazing sport coming on Soccer Morning, sitting in for a half hour. Stu, I appreciate it, man. Best of luck.
Thanks, man. Thanks for all the listeners for convincing me to come on. You guys are very persuasive.
Yeah. This is the last time we do this. I promise we're not going to do it again. We may pick another player. In fact, do you have a suggestion? Who should we go after next?
Get Mike McGee.
All right, Mike McGee, everybody. We're going to go bum rush him on Twitter. That's going to do it for Soccer Morning. North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Thank you to Musa Okwonga and to Christopher Gaffney and obviously Stu Holden. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks, man. Bye.